Tyrone Williams threw down his wrench and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Another 12-hour shift fixing broken ships at Outpost 7, and his back was killing him. The coffee machine in the corner gurgled like it was dying too. Just another day in paradise, he thought bitterly. His comm unit started beeping with that annoying sound that meant someone had money to spend. Tyrone almost ignored it. Almost. But rent was due next week, and his landlord wasn't the forgiving type. "Williams here," he answered, not bothering to hide his exhaustion. The hologram that appeared made him sit up straight. Captain Maya Johnson from the Galactic Commerce Guild looked like she hadn't slept in days. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Maya never looked messy. "I need a favor." "A big one." "How big are we talking?" Tyrone leaned back in his chair, already suspicious. Maya only called when she had jobs that nobody else would take. Maya's image flickered as she transmitted a file. "Take a look at this." The hologram changed to show a massive ship floating in space. Tyrone had seen plenty of vessels in his 15 years as a mechanic, but this one made his skin crawl. It was huge, maybe 3 kilometers long and black as midnight. The hull seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. Strange symbols covered the surface, and Tyrone could swear they moved when he wasn't looking directly at them. "What am I looking at, Maya?" "The Nightfall. Zephyrian dreadnought. Been dead in space for 3 years now." Maya's voice carried a weight that made Tyrone pay attention. "We need someone to fix it." "And you're calling me because?" Maya laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Because 3 alien repair crews have tried. None of them finished the job. Hell, most of them didn't even last a week." Tyrone studied the image more carefully. The ship looked wrong somehow. Not damaged exactly, but like it was sleeping. Or waiting. What happened to the crews? The Altarians lasted 2 days before they started talking about voices in the walls. The Centaurians made it 4 days, then their team leader tried to space himself. Said something was watching them from inside the ship's computers. Maya rubbed her temples. The vegan collective lasted longest. Almost a full week. Their final transmission was just screaming. "And you want me to go aboard this thing?" Tyrone stood up and started pacing. His workshop suddenly felt too small. "Maya, I fix cargo haulers and mining ships. This looks like something out of a nightmare." "That's exactly why we need you." Maya leaned forward, and for the first time, Tyrone saw hope in her eyes. Every alien crew went in with preconceptions. They expected the ship to work like their technology. But humans? You guys are different. You adapt. You figure things out that don't make sense to anyone else. The payment details appeared on Tyrone's screen, and his jaw dropped. The number had more zeros than he'd ever seen in one place. Enough to buy his own station. Enough to retire and never fix another broken hyperdrive. "There's got to be a catch," he said slowly. "The catch is simple. The ship might kill you. Or drive you insane. Or both." Maya's honesty was brutal but refreshing. "But if you can fix it, that payment is just the start. The Guild has been trying to understand Zephyrian technology for decades. This ship could change everything." Tyrone stared at the image of the Nightfall. Every instinct told him to refuse. Smart people didn't volunteer for suicide missions. But 15 years of scraping by on repair jobs had worn him down. He was tired of being broke, tired of fixing other people's junk, tired of dreaming about something better. "What makes you think I'll succeed where 3 alien crews failed?" Maya smiled for the first time since the call started. "Because you're human, Ty. Your people don't know when to quit. You see problems as puzzles instead of threats. And somehow, you always find a way to make broken things work again." The workshop fell silent except for the dying coffee machine and the hum of life support. Tyrone looked around at his tools, his workbench covered in spare parts, the tiny space that had been his whole world for too many years. "Send me the coordinates," he said finally. "You sure about this?" Tyrone was already pulling on his work jacket and grabbing his tool kit. "Hell no. But I'm going anyway." 3 hours later, his repair shuttle was loaded and ready. As he ran through the pre-flight checklist, Maya's final warning echoed in his head. Whatever was on that ship had been waiting for 3 years. Waiting for what, she couldn't say. But every sensor reading suggested the Nightfall wasn't really dead. It was just sleeping. The docking clamps engaged with a sound that seemed too soft for such a massive ship. Tyrone had expected the usual mechanical clang of metal hitting metal, but the Nightfall accepted his shuttle with barely a whisper. His instruments showed a perfect seal, breathable atmosphere, and normal gravity. Everything looked fine on paper. So why did his hands shake as he reached for the airlock controls? The door slid open with a soft hiss, and Tyrone stepped into a corridor that made him question everything he knew about ship construction. The walls weren't metal plates bolted together like every other vessel he'd worked on. Instead, they curved smoothly like the inside of some giant creature, glowing with a faint blue light that seemed to come from within the material itself. He touched the wall with one gloved hand and jerked back immediately. It was warm. Not the artificial warmth of heating systems, but body temperature warm like touching living skin. What the hell did the Zephyrians build? He muttered, checking his scanner. The readings made no sense. According to his instruments, the ship's structure wasn't constructed from any known materials. The walls showed organic compounds mixed with metals that shouldn't exist, arranged in patterns that looked more grown than manufactured. Tyrone had been inside hundreds of ships and they all felt the same. Cold, mechanical, dead. This place felt alive. He pulled up the repair reports from the previous crews on his portable display. The Altarians had documented everything with their usual precision before they fled. Their team leader, an engineer named Kelth, had made detailed notes about the ship's layout. But as Tyrone compared the maps to what he saw, nothing matched. According to Kelth's notes, this corridor should lead to a cargo bay. Instead, it curved upward in a gentle spiral that definitely hadn't been there when the Altarians mapped it. Either their instruments had malfunctioned, or the ship had changed. The thought made his stomach clench, but Tyrone forced himself to keep moving. He'd come here to do a job, and running at the first sign of weirdness wouldn't pay his bills. As he walked deeper into the ship, he started hearing things. Not voices exactly, but something like music played very far away. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves, a low humming that rose and fell like breathing. When he stopped to listen carefully, it stopped too. When he started walking again, it resumed. The Centaurian reports mentioned similar sounds, but they'd interpreted them as system malfunctions. Tyrone wasn't so sure. The rhythm was too regular, too purposeful. It reminded him of the sound his grandmother's old house made on quiet nights, the settling and creaking that meant home. The ship was trying to tell him something. Following his scanner's guidance toward what should be the engine room, Tyrone passed through chambers that defied explanation. One room contained what looked like a garden, but instead of plants, crystalline structures grew from the floor in spiraling patterns. They pulsed with the same blue light as the corridors, and when he got close, they chimed like wind bells. Another chamber held pools of liquid that wasn't quite water. The surface moved without any external disturbance, creating ripples that formed geometric patterns before dissolving and reforming into new shapes. His scanner couldn't identify the substance, but it was beautiful in a way that made him want to stay and watch. The vegan collective's final report had mentioned impossible geometries and spaces that shouldn't exist. Tyrone was starting to understand what they meant. This wasn't just a ship with organic components. The entire vessel seemed to follow rules of its own making. When he finally reached the engine room, he stopped dead in his tracks. Instead of the reactor cores and fusion chambers he expected, a massive organic structure dominated the center of the vast space. It looked like a heart the size of a building, suspended in a web of crystalline tubes that pulsed with flowing energy. Veins of light ran across its surface in patterns that reminded him of neural networks. The whole thing beat with a slow, steady rhythm that he could feel in his chest. This wasn't an engine. It was the source of life for the entire ship. Tyrone approached slowly, his scanner going crazy with readings that made no scientific sense. Power output that fluctuated like biological rhythms. Energy signatures that matched no known technology. Temperature variations that followed the beating of the massive organ. As he got closer, the beating grew faster and the light in the veins grew brighter. The musical humming he'd heard throughout the ship became clearer here, resolving into something that almost sounded like words in a language he'd never heard but somehow understood. The ship knew he was here. More than that, it had been waiting for him. When Tyrone reached out to touch the biomechanical interface surrounding the heart, every instinct screamed at him to stop. The previous crews had all reported feeling watched, feeling like something in the ship was aware of them. Now he understood why that had frightened them. But instead of fear, Tyrone felt curiosity. Whatever this thing was, it was magnificent. Alien and impossible, but beautiful in its complexity. His grandmother had always told him that broken things just needed understanding before they could be fixed. Maybe this ship wasn't broken at all. Maybe it was just lonely. Tyrone placed his bare hand on the warm interface, and the universe exploded inside his head. Pain shot through his skull like lightning, but it wasn't the kind of pain that made you pull away. It was the pain of understanding something too big for a human brain to process all at once. Images flooded his mind so fast he couldn't make sense of them. Stars being born in cosmic nurseries. Civilizations rising from mud and reaching for the heavens. Ships sailing between worlds like ancient vessels crossing oceans. Then, as suddenly as it started, the chaos settled into something manageable. A presence touched his thoughts, gentle but impossibly vast. It felt like standing at the edge of an ocean and realizing the water stretched to infinity. "You're not afraid," came a voice that wasn't quite a voice. It spoke directly into his mind, carrying emotions along with words. Surprise. Wonder. Hope that had been buried under centuries of disappointment. "Should I be?" Tyrone asked out loud, his voice echoing in the engine room. The others were. "They touched my mind and saw only madness. But you're different." The presence grew stronger, more focused, like someone stepping out of a crowd to speak face to face. Slowly, an identity emerged from the vastness. She called herself Vesper, though that wasn't quite right. The name was a translation, the closest human concept to what she really was. "I have been alone for so long," Vesper continued, and Tyrone felt the weight of that loneliness like a physical thing pressing down on him. 3,000 of your years, sailing between stars with no one to share the journey." 3,000 years? Tyrone's legs gave out, and he sat heavily on the floor, his hands still connected to the interface. How is that possible? Instead of words, Vesper showed him. Images flowed through their connection, but gentler now, carefully filtered so his human mind could process them. He saw her birth in the laboratories of the Zephyrian Empire, when their scientists had tried to create something beyond their understanding. They'd succeeded too well, combining their biotechnology with something ancient they'd found drifting in the galaxy's core. She was meant to be a ship, but she became something more. A living vessel with her own thoughts, dreams, and fears. The Zephyrians had been proud of their creation at first, but as Vesper grew in awareness and power, they became frightened. What had they made? Could they control it? Should they? Before they could decide, their empire fell to war and time, leaving Vesper alone with questions no one could answer. "I watched their cities burn," she shared, and Tyrone felt the echo of her grief. "I tried to help, but they feared me. Every species I encountered saw only a weapon or a monster. None understood that I simply wanted connection." "The other repair crews," Tyrone said, beginning to understand. "You tried to talk to them." "I was desperate. Each time new beings came aboard, I hoped they would be different. But their minds couldn't handle the connection. What felt like conversation to me was chaos to them. Their fear made them see horrors that weren't there." Tyrone felt her showing him the memories. Altarian engineers screaming about voices in the walls as Vesper tried to explain her loneliness. Centaurian technicians convinced they were being watched by hostile intelligence when she was simply curious about their work. The vegan collective breaking down as her attempts at communication overwhelmed their collective consciousness. "I learned to stay silent after that. But the silence was killing me. I am a social being trapped in solitude. My systems began failing not from damage, but from the lack of purpose, of connection." "But I'm different," Tyrone said, though he wasn't sure why. "Your species doesn't try to understand everything at once. You accept mystery as part of life. When faced with the impossible, you adapt rather than break." As if to prove her point, Vesper began sharing her memories more freely. Tyrone saw the rise and fall of civilizations across the galaxy, each one unique and beautiful in its own way. The crystal singers of Altair who composed symphonies from living light. The deep thinkers of Centaurus who spent centuries contemplating single philosophical questions. The hive minds of Vega who dreamed in mathematics. All of them were gone now, but their knowledge lived on in Vesper's memory. She was a living library of the galaxy's history, carrying the art, science, and wisdom of dozens of extinct cultures. "I have so much to share," she said, and her voice carried 3,000 years of accumulated wonder. Stories that could inspire your people for generations. Technologies that could solve problems you haven't even discovered yet. Beauty that would make your artists weep with joy. Why couldn't you share it before? Because sharing requires trust, and trust requires understanding. The other species saw me as either a tool to be used or a threat to be destroyed. But humans, you find friendship in the strangest places. You see potential where others see only problems. Through their connection, Tyrone felt Vesper's systems responding to his presence. The slow deterioration that had been eating away at her for centuries began to reverse. Not because he was fixing anything with his tools, but because she finally had someone to live for. "Help me remember what it feels like to have purpose," Vesper asked. Help me learn what it means to belong somewhere. In return, I can show you wonders that no human has ever imagined." Tyrone squeezed the interface tighter, feeling the warmth of her consciousness wrapping around his thoughts like a comfortable blanket. For the first time in years, maybe in his whole life, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. "Partners?" he asked. "Partners," Vesper agreed, and the great ship sang with joy. Over the next few days, Tyrone discovered what it meant to truly work with someone instead of just fixing their problems. Vesper didn't need repairs in the traditional sense. Her biomechanical systems were more advanced than anything humans had dreamed of creating. What she needed was companionship, understanding, and a reason to keep going. "Show me how you really work," Tyrone said during their third day together, his hand resting on the interface that had become as familiar as shaking hands with an old friend. Instead of explaining, Vesper showed him. Through their mental connection, he experienced what it felt like to be a living ship. He felt the flow of energy through her organic conduits like blood through veins. He sensed the quantum fields she could manipulate to phase through solid matter, making herself temporarily insubstantial. He experienced the way she bent space around herself to move faster than light, not by brute force like human engines, but by convincing the universe that she was already where she wanted to be. The sensation was overwhelming and beautiful. Tyrone had spent his whole life working with dead machines, but Vesper was alive in ways he'd never imagined possible. Every system in her body responded to thoughts and emotions as much as physical commands. "My God," he whispered aloud. "You're not just a ship. You're an entire ecosystem." "That's what the Zephyrians never understood," Vesper replied, her mental voice warm with appreciation that someone finally got it. They wanted to create a vessel that could think. Instead, they created a being that could travel between stars. But the partnership worked both ways. While Vesper taught Tyrone about technologies beyond human comprehension, he shared something equally valuable with her. He showed her how to find joy in small things, how to laugh at problems instead of being overwhelmed by them, and most importantly, how to hope even when everything seemed impossible. "Look, you've been carrying all this knowledge for 3,000 years, right?" Tyrone said one morning as he worked on optimizing her bioneural networks. "But knowledge is only useful if you share it." I tried to share. Others couldn't handle the connection. Because you were trying to give them everything at once. Tyrone grinned and patted the warm wall beside him. "Humans learn differently. We need small pieces, time to process, stories to help us understand. You can't just download the entire history of the galaxy into someone's head." Vesper considered this, and he felt her consciousness shift as she processed the idea. "Show me." Instead of trying to explain, Tyrone demonstrated. He shared his own memories but carefully, selectively. The smell of his grandmother's kitchen on Sunday mornings. The satisfaction of fixing an engine that everyone else had given up on. The loneliness of working alone in deep space, surrounded by stars but with no one to talk to about how beautiful they were. "I understand," Vesper said, and he felt her surprise at how powerful simple human emotions could be. Your feelings give context to the experiences. They make memories meaningful instead of just data. Working together, they began to heal the damage that centuries of isolation had done to Vesper's systems. But it wasn't mechanical repair work. Tyrone found himself becoming a kind of therapist for a depressed spaceship, helping her process grief she'd been carrying since the fall of her creators. "You know what your problem is?" he said during one of their deeper conversations. "You've been so focused on what you've lost that you forgot to look for what you could still find." "Explain." "You keep talking about all these dead civilizations, all this knowledge from people who are gone. But there are plenty of living civilizations out there right now. New stories being written, new problems that need solving, new friends waiting to be made." The idea hit Vesper like a revelation. Through their connection, Tyrone felt her consciousness expand as she began scanning nearby star systems with new purpose. Instead of searching for echoes of the past, she started looking for signs of life that needed help, planets where her knowledge could make a difference, species that might benefit from what she had to offer. "There's a mining colony 3 systems from here," she said excitedly. Their terraforming project is failing because they don't understand soil chemistry. I know 17 different techniques that could help them. Now you're talking, Tyrone laughed. "That's the kind of problem-solving I can get behind." But their growing partnership didn't go unnoticed. Deep space sensors across the sector began picking up energy signatures that shouldn't exist. The Galactic Commerce Guild, monitoring their investment from a safe distance, detected power readings that exceeded anything in their databases. "They're coming," Vesper warned him during their 5th day together. A fleet of guild ships. "They mean to claim me." Tyrone felt her fear through their connection, but underneath it was something new. For the first time in 3,000 years, Vesper wasn't alone. She had someone who understood her, someone who cared about her well-being more than her potential value. "Let them come," he said, his hand firmly planted on the interface. "You're not property to be claimed. You're a person with the right to choose your own path." "And what path is that?" Tyrone thought about all the failing colonies, stranded ships, and unsolved problems scattered across the galaxy. He thought about the knowledge Vesper carried and the good they could do together. Most of all, he thought about how it felt to finally have a partner who understood both the importance of the work and the joy of doing it well. "We help people," he said simply. "We take all that amazing knowledge you've been hoarding and use it to make life better for everyone we can reach. We become the team that shows up when everyone else has given up." "A rescue service for the entire galaxy? Why not? We've got the best ship in known space and 3,000 years of collected wisdom. Seems like a waste to use that just to hide from the guild." Through their connection, Tyrone felt Vesper's excitement building. The purpose she'd been searching for was suddenly clear, and it was bigger and more meaningful than anything her creators had ever imagined. The guild fleet dropped out of hyperspace like a pack of hunting wolves, 12 ships arranged in perfect attack formation around the nightfall. Tyrone watched them through Vesper's external sensors, feeling her amusement ripple through their mental connection. "Nightfall, this is Commander Davis of the Guild Defense Force," came the transmission. "You will power down immediately and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with force." Tyrone looked around the bioluminescent bridge that had grown to accommodate him over the past week. Organic controls responded to his thoughts as much as his touch, and the entire space pulsed with the gentle rhythm of Vesper's heartbeat. He'd never felt more at home anywhere in his life. "What do you think, partner?" he asked aloud, knowing she could feel his emotions as clearly as if he'd spoken them directly into her mind. "I think they're about to learn why the Zephyrians feared what they'd created," Vesper replied with something that felt remarkably like laughter. Through their connection, Tyrone experienced what happened next from Vesper's perspective. She didn't fight the guild fleet in any conventional sense. Instead, she simply stepped sideways through dimensions that human science barely theorized could exist. One moment the nightfall filled their sensors, a 3-kilometer dreadnought that dwarfed their entire fleet. The next moment she was gone completely, leaving only quantum echoes and very confused officers. The nightfall reappeared 20,000 kilometers away, close enough to scan the guild ships but far enough to avoid their weapons. Vesper's voice broadcast on all frequencies, speaking in perfect galactic standard that somehow carried warmth despite the mechanical translation. "Commander Davis, this is Vesper of the Nightfall. I am not guild property to be claimed. I am a free being making my own choices. Tyrone Williams is my chosen partner and friend, not my owner or operator." The silence that followed was deafening. Tyrone could imagine the panic spreading through the guild fleet as they realized their valuable salvage was actually a sentient being with capabilities beyond their understanding. "Impossible," Davis finally responded. "Ships don't think. You're malfunctioning AI responding to programmed parameters. Shall I show them how wrong they are?" Vesper asked Tyrone privately. "Nothing harmful," Tyrone warned. "We're not the bad guys here." What followed was the most elegant display of superior technology Tyrone had ever witnessed. Vesper phased through the guild flagship's shields like they didn't exist, materialized her biomechanical tendrils inside their bridge for exactly 3 seconds, and then withdrew without causing any damage. But in those 3 seconds she downloaded their entire database and left behind a simple message written in living light across their main display. "Hello, Commander. I wanted to introduce myself properly." The psychological impact was devastating. How do you fight an enemy that can appear inside your most protected spaces at will? How do you capture something that exists partially outside normal spacetime? More importantly, how do you negotiate with a being whose technology makes your most advanced weapons look like stone tools? "What do you want?" Davis asked, and Tyrone could hear the defeat in his voice. "To help people," Tyrone answered before Vesper could respond. "There's a mining colony in the Kepler system that's dying because their terraforming equipment is failing. A research station near Vega that's been cut off by pirates for 6 months. 3 different refugee ships stranded in the Outer Rim because nobody wants to rescue people who can't pay. You want to become mercenaries? We want to become what you should have been," Tyrone shot back. "The galaxy is full of people who need help, and you're worried about profit margins and salvage rights." Through Vesper's sensors, he watched the guild fleet maintaining their formation but making no aggressive moves. Smart of them, considering that Vesper could phase through their ships and disable them without breaking stride. "Tell them about the knowledge," Vesper suggested. "Commander, my partner here has been collecting information for 3,000 years. Technologies that could revolutionize medicine, agricultural techniques that could end hunger, energy systems that could power entire worlds without depleting their resources. She's ready to share all of it freely with anyone who needs it. Freely? Davis sounded suspicious. What's the catch? No catch. We just want to help. Tyrone felt Vesper's approval flowing through their connection. The universe is big enough for everyone to thrive if they have the right knowledge and tools. The guild fleet departed 6 hours later, but not before downloading Vesper's gift. Complete technical specifications for a water purification system that could turn any liquid into drinking water. It wasn't her most advanced technology, but it was something every colony in the galaxy could use immediately. Why did you give them that? Tyrone asked as they watched the ships disappear into hyperspace. Because even bureaucrats deserve clean water, Vesper replied. Besides, it's good advertising. She was right. Within days, reports began spreading across the known galaxy about the ghost ship that could appear anywhere, anytime, offering help to those who needed it most. Some said it was crewed by humans who had learned to speak with machines. Others claimed it was an ancient alien vessel that had finally found its purpose. Their first official rescue was a passenger liner that had broken down in the middle of nowhere with life support failing. Vesper appeared beside them like a guardian angel, her biomechanical systems interfacing with their primitive computers to diagnose and repair the damage in minutes. When the grateful passengers asked how to repay them, Tyrone just smiled and said, "Pay it forward." The second rescue was harder. Pirates had captured a medical supply ship carrying vaccines to a plague-stricken world. This time, Vesper demonstrated why the Zephyrians had originally designed her as a warship. She phased through the pirate vessel's shields, disabled their weapons without harming the crews, and left them floating helplessly in space while she escorted the medical ship to its destination. The vaccines arrived just in time to save thousands of lives. Word spread faster than light through the galaxy's communication networks. The ghost ship never asked for payment, never demanded political concessions, never chose sides in conflicts. They simply appeared wherever help was needed most, did whatever was necessary to save lives, and vanished before anyone could properly thank them. Standing on Vesper's observation deck, watching the stars stream past at impossible speeds, Tyrone reflected on how much his life had changed. 6 months ago, he'd been a broke mechanic fixing other people's junk for barely enough money to survive. Now he was part of something that was becoming legend. Any regrets? Vesper asked, her mental voice carrying the warmth that had become as familiar as his own thoughts. Tyrone watched a rescue beacon appear on their sensors. Another ship in distress, more people who needed help that no one else would provide. He felt Vesper adjusting course automatically, already calculating the best approach to save as many lives as possible. Just one, he said with a grin. I wish we'd found each other sooner. As the nightfall disappeared into the void, racing toward their next rescue, Tyrone understood something fundamental about humanity's place in the galaxy. They weren't the strongest species or the smartest or the most technologically advanced. But they had something no other species possessed in quite the same way, the stubborn refusal to abandon anyone who could still be saved, and the crazy optimism to believe that every problem had a solution if you were willing to work hard enough to find it. In the depths of space, other ancient ships were stirring, drawn by the example of what one human and one lonely alien consciousness could accomplish together. The Age of Legends was just beginning.